And so you mentioned that you and your siblings saw a boy get shot. So did you or your siblings ever have any PTSD over that incident?
No, I don't think so. And the only thing is my brother doesn't want to talk about the war ever, ever. Um, he just did not. Um, no, not really.
Yeah. But when growing up, when you're in the rare instances when your relatives would talk about the war, did they seem to hold any grudges against the Japanese or hold
Uh,
bitterness?
not when I was around. Um, the and No, even my father, who had daily contact with Japanese, I never heard him. I never heard him say anything, um, except that one incident he told me about in San Francisco when he saw a group of about four Japanese men walking down the sidewalk, and he said he went right back to his office. He just did. He was pretty upset about that. I mean, he said all of a sudden it flashed to him and said that uh, that they were in uniform. He said that's all and he just went into his office till they passed. My uncle later on in business in Manila, the Philippines, did uh, did business with the Japanese. So no, there was never. I've never. And they traveled to Japan. My father never did, but my uncle did. I never heard them say anything. The only time is um, my friend Johnny Rocha and my brother and I all agreed that um, we were hoping that an apology of some sort would come from the Japanese government officially, and Johnny passed away about 4 years ago, so that he he always would say to us, "Well, I don't know when they're going to apologize. That's all I care about. That doesn't have to be long, written out um, paragraphs. Just accepting uh, accepting what they did during the war."
Just
And
issue an official apology.
yeah, that's all. That's all I care about. But that's never happened. I don't know if it ever will. Um, that's you know
Yeah. But when you were growing up, you grew up with mostly a neutral view of Japan or something. You didn't. Did you ever grow up like with a dislike of Japan imparted into you?
Well, I never thought much about Japan. I remember um, people talking about traveling to Japan, how wonderful the Japanese. This was after the war, traveling to Japan, how wonderful the Japanese people were, and I just would tune them out. Well, I'd say okay, but then again, as I said, I have some Japanese American friends, and I don't feel that way about them at all, and they're very open about it. I mean, they're born here. They um, uh, second or third generation. I mean, these are most. I have some friends in Hawaii who are Japanese Americans, and uh, so I don't. I just never really cared about going to Japan, and that's the way it is. I and when I was on the board of the Asian Art Museum, I never paid much attention to the Japanese art, but I did to the Chinese, Korean art and the other art, but I never paid much attention to it. So I haven't really done much. Maybe I just on purpose.
Yeah. So maybe you have some sort of subconscious resentment.
Could be, yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
But it's not. It's nothing like oh I hate like this group of people.
No. And I know that certainly they're partners, and uh, thank God, that they're strong partners
Yeah.
of the U.S. So,
Yeah.
when in when was it, 52 or something early, it was interesting. That's when the Korean War started, and I remember some of my the students, some American students that I knew, all of a sudden packed up and went back home. They said, we're not going to stay here because it's going to be another war here. And they all left. And we went, and so I said to my father, well, are we going anywhere? And my father said, no, we're staying here. It's far away. It's not going to happen here. It's not going to come here. So, but it was interesting when
Yeah.
everybody panicked and went off.
Yeah. Yeah. And so are most of the Japanese friends that you have in the United States Japanese Americans, or do you have some, or one that was born in Japan but came here, is a recent immigrant?
No, I don't. I think years ago when my children were little, I was in a play group with a friend, and I met this woman who was here with her child, who was the same age as my son, and her husband. They were both from Japan, and he was working in San Francisco, and I got to know her, and it was a very pleasant. And we never talked. I never talked about the war. I never talked about anything, but it was mostly a friendship based on. She couldn't speak English very well, and she wanted to practice her English. So I kind of helped her with that. And we had our children in common. And so it was a very nice, friendly friendship that we had. Uh, but most of them are, and then one of my good friends' daughter-in-law is her parents were born in Japan and came to the United States years and years ago, and their children were all born here. And I know her daughter very well, but they're Americanized. And the father, I know my friend spoke to the father one time about the war because she had gone to the Philippines with me, and so she came back and she asked the father-in-law about it, and the father-in-law said, "Oh, I don't think so. I don't know anything about that." And at the time, he was a boy. He was 9 years old, living in Japan during the war. But he said, "Oh no, that didn't happen." So I know that there's denial in the Japan, and they don't. Even the Japanese don't know about it. So they have to educate their own people. But is it too late? I don't know. I don't know if it's too late or not to educate the Japanese. I think the ones that we are in touch with through Memorare Manila keep trying to get it into the curriculum and talk about it. So there are some who want to do that, but maybe it'll be another 100 years before they do it.
Yeah, it seems that whenever you breach the subject or work on something like this, progress is very slow, right? You take 4 steps forward, but then another 2, 3 steps back.
Yeah, but I don't want to take it out on this generation because they had nothing to do with it. Or the generation, my generation, we were children. I mean, they didn't have a skin in the game. So, anyway.
Yeah, but who do you think that, or what do you think there's the lingering resentments that's in your subconscious is directed at? Like, is it the government? Is it the people?
Yeah, I think it's the government, and I think that yeah, I think it's the government mostly that I'd like to find some that go back and say, I'm sorry, we didn't know about it. Now we're educating our population in this, but I think it's a cultural thing with the Japanese. I think it's hard for them to admit. And certainly some books have been written about the treatment of during the war, but it doesn't seem to get to the Japanese, So I think it's a cultural thing with them. I think they think that if they admit anything, it'll make them be less of a country, instead of thinking, well, if they admit something, then they're admitting something that was done and it'll never happen again. I know they've made gestures, for instance, that's why they don't have an army or they don't have a big navy, that they're doing all those things. And that's the gesture which came out of the war. But I'm sorry. That's all.
Yeah, and that's what an apology is, just
An apology. Yeah.
everything that victims really want. It's not like
Yeah. Yeah. It's political. So.
Yeah, but then also with not having an army or a navy is also partially imposed on them by like the Americans who.
Absolutely, yeah. And I know that the emperor and empress were in the Philippines a couple of years ago, and they went to dedicate something out in the provinces, and they made almost the apology. I mean, close to it. But then you got to remember his grandfather was the emperor during the war, and that's another thing. Who takes responsibility? Because in some things that I've read, the emperor was complicit in all of this. So, a lot of Japanese consider the emperor as almost a god, a deity. So, who are they? Would they include him in the apology, or that would just say we as the government of Japan consider ourselves responsible for this, and we apologize, and we hope that that we can make amends or something through this. So that's another thing. It has ties in with the emperor. I don't know how important the emperor is to the Japanese people nowadays as he was a generation or two ago. I don't know. I don't know.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, because I think even in America, well, the emperor was given a pardon for during the war crimes, right?
Yeah.
Even in America, sometimes they teach that the emperor was just a puppet and he didn't have anything to do with this.
Yeah.
But it seems that a lot of the victims in Asia seem to disagree with that. They think that he was at least partially responsible for some of the things.
And I think that when MacArthur went to Japan after the war, he was very conscious of the emperor's status, and to keep it together, to keep the Japanese people focused on getting through the war and establishing a government and still honoring the emperor, because I think that it tied in with the culture and everything. So. Anyway, it's a complicated issue.
Yeah, really intimately tied together with like political and economic.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, because America really wanted to, convert Japan into a close ally during the Cold War period.
So, yeah, important.
In order to stop this or like contain the spread of communism in Asia,
Yeah.
Because
that's another issue completely.
Yeah, but it's all connected though.
Absolutely, it's all connected. Yeah.
You'd be amazed, or maybe not for you, since like you've been researching into this, of how so many things connect all back to the war and the.
Yeah, because just speaking of the communist threat, one of the big guerrilla groups in Manila, in the Philippines, was the Hukbalahaps, and they became the insurgent communist rebel force after the war. And when we were there in the 50s, they had captured enough of land in Luzon. They were 50 miles away from Manila. They almost got Manila. I mean, and they had turned they were the communist rebels. So that all stemmed from how they got their guerrilla training during the war, and they were a very important part of his insurgency, which is morphed into something else now called the New Guerrilla Army. Oh my God, it never stops.
It really doesn't.
No. Yeah.
So since you mentioned that your parents and this Filipino society as a whole didn't really talk about the war when you were growing up, so did you think too much of it as a young adult?
No, not really. I mean, it was always part of my life. I think it struck me when I came to the United States, and my friends who didn't know my background, I mean, I uh, would talk about, during the war, they'd say things like uh, they couldn't have, there was no butter, and they had to eat margarine, or something about, I don't know, they had these little things that they had to suffer through the war, and I just kept my mouth shut. It's like saying, well, butter, margarine, you mean, you went without that, and then, as I told you, I think before, that when I had to answer questions like, especially medical questions, when they'd say, all your parents still alive? If not, how did they die? And I would say, oh, well, my mother, is deceased, and she died in an accident. That's how I would say. I never talked to it. That's how I lied, because I didn't want to talk about it. And I think I went through college not even talking about it ever. And a couple of my friends knew about it, but they kind of went, oh, okay. And it was just, I'd say around the time when I got married, of course, I told my husband about it, and he knew all about it. So he was aware of it. But I really didn't talk about it. And then when I started Memorare, then things and my friends started getting interested. What are you doing? How? Why are you there? What happened? And then the book that my brother and I had written came out, and I gave it to some of my friends, and that's when the dialogue opened up. And I was able to talk to, mostly with men. The women, my women friends, some of them were interested, but mostly my friends of ours, men friends, were mostly interested.
And why mostly your male friends? That's
Well, I think it's the idea that most of them had been drafted, had served time in the military. Men are more interested in war, I think, than women are. So that's how and this book that came out in 1995, I did some of my friends read it, and I did go to some book clubs and talked to them about it then. And since then, in the last few years, I've done a few lectures to school groups, community groups. Cecilia and I have gone with her. And they're groups who have invited me to come and talk.
Yeah. And so, did your father ever receive any reparations for his experience as a POW?
Yeah, he did, through the British government. 10,000 pounds, which in those days, I think it was at the beginning of late 1990s, 99, it was probably, I think each of us got $2,000 from it. So yeah, but it was from the British government. I think the American government, none of my American friends got anything, because I think there was something, and I'll have to look this up, in one of the agreements that no reparations would be paid to Americans by the Japanese government. See, the Japanese government didn't pay my father. It was the British, and it was a movement started by the veterans of the British veterans. So that the government did this. The British government did this. But no, so nothing.
Yeah, but this was not until 50 years or so, right after the.
Oh yeah, it was I think it was 1999 or something, or something like that we got it.
Yeah. So what finally made push the British government to
I don't know. I'll have to find out, because I have no idea. One day, my stepmother got this check in the mail saying that it was for my father, and it went to her because she was his wife, and then she in turn deposited in her account, and then she wrote us each of us a check for $2,000. So I have no idea. I think it was just they did that. But the U.S. After there were some really crazy things that the government, U.S. government, didn't attend to, and that was one of them. The American civilians didn't get it. As far as I know, they've never received anything.
Yeah, for their POW experience, but
Yeah,
Japan also never paid the POW
no,
anything.
but I think that was an agreement with the U.S. government after the war that they wouldn't ask for but the U.S. did give the Philippines some reparations, but it never filtered down. I don't think it filtered down to the American citizens who were in internment.
Yeah, but Japan also didn't pay your father, right? Any of the other allies?
No, nothing. No, or anybody else. No.
Yeah. And you said that for a long time after the war, you wouldn't talk about it, and you would actually like lie when people would ask you what happened to your parents, who your mother, who was deceased. So what made you? How did you become interested in sharing your stories and in researching the events of the war in the Philippines?
Yeah, I did. I became interested, in 1993 again, and started doing more research and talking to different people, and in the Philippines, talking to everybody on the board that we got together on this board at Memorare. Were all descendants of somebody of their family, having been killed during the war. So we all had that in common, and we would hear stories about them from them. And then another thing that sparked a great deal of interest was this TV program, PBS program, we did on World War II. What's his name? Oh, he does a series of different things like he just did one on Nashville and what's his name? Anyway, he's famous for that. And one of the people who talked about the Philippines in the internment camp was this woman called Sasha Jensen. And she was 10, 12 or 12, maybe 14, 12, 14 when she was interned with her family. And so I got interested in finding out a little bit more about Sasha, and who I had not known. And it turned out that she had started a group called BASEPOW, which stands for Bay Area Civilian Ex-Prisoners of War. And she and her family were interned in Santo Tomas. So I got involved with them, and I met Sasha, and she became a real mentor to me. And I heard about lots more about the internment, about that. So from there, and then I met Cecilia, and then really got involved and interested even more. And then my brother and I had started the collection in the Philippines, and so that added to it. So it's just snowballed from there, and talked, and then lots more books came out. I went to reunions of BASEPOW reunions, and I met lots of different people there, and they told their stories. And so and now and Bataan Legacy, when Cecilia and I started doing the conferences, we learned more and more that way. So it's just been snowballing.
Yeah, and you mentioned that Memorare Manila was where it all started, where you first made connections with lots of people who shared similar experiences during the war, and who knew a lot about what happened. So, what can you tell me about how this organization was founded, and like why you felt the need to create this organization?
Well, in around 1992 or 1993, we realized that 1995 was going to be the 50th anniversary of the liberation of Manila. And we made our inquiries in the Philippines to see if anything was being planned, because most people plan things 2 or 3 years or 4 years or 5 years before the event. We found out that there was absolutely zippo interest in the Philippines. No one had probably even considered it. So we thought, what can we do? And here it was in San Francisco. So Johnny Rocha, who is our childhood friend, happened to be in San Francisco, and we said, hey, let's get together, let's brainstorm this. And he said, absolutely, we could do something. We should do something. And we agreed. So he was going to be the point person in Manila, and we would be the point people here. And we would agree, what should we do? Well, we have to remember this is the event that we want to bring to people's attention. And so we want to do something that will open up the interest in the war and just have an event, something to remember. So what should we do? So we said, well, okay, let's have a mass at the cathedral, and then we said let's have a statue, and we thought that's a great idea. And one other thing was something. Oh, and let's have a book written. We were like, this could happen, and we were just so naive. So we decided, shall we just do one of the things? We said, no, let's do all three. So we got on the ball. We got the people to research the information about the book. We chose 3 British military historians. Archives had just opened up, so they went to work on that. We went to work on the mass, and we thought, well, we'll have this mass, we'll have requiem mass, and next thing we know, we had the cardinal of Manila, the Philippines, was going to be at the mass. He was going to officiate, and then we got the Manila Symphony was going to come and be at the mass. So we did, and then we thought, now we got to get the statue. So, well, what do we do about the statue? Well, Johnny got them to give us a corner in the old section of Manila, in the walled city, and then we thought, okay, well, let's find somebody who can create a statue. So we looked, Johnny and some other friends looked around for somebody in the Philippines, and we found this sculptor. He was just getting started, and we posed the idea to him, and he said he would absolutely be interested, and he would come up with an idea, a rendering. Then we had the reality hit us. Who's going to pay for all this? And that was a big joke, because we had to pay the authors who were going to write the book, right? And then we had to pay the sculptor. Then we had to fix up this corner where we were going to put the statue. So we started tapping the friends we knew in the Philippines and here, and people were very generous, and they came, opened their wallets, and gave us the money. It was easier than we thought, and we were very humbled by how many people were interested in this. So we came up with the statue. I don't know if you've seen a picture of the statue. It's a very, and it appeals profoundly to the Filipino psyche and emotional status, because you're familiar with the Pietà, which was Michelangelo's sculpture of Mary holding the body of Jesus, and so he framed it in that sort of genre. And there's a woman who looks like Mary, and she's holding in her arms, she's holding a baby, and then there are other people around her representing the Mary represents the Filipino nation, and she's holding this baby who could have been the next generation coming, who's dead, has been killed, and all the people who around her, the men and the women who are almost weeping in sorrow for their country. And it's a powerful emotional statue. I mean, every time I see it, I cry. To me, it's really beautiful. And so that's what we agreed to, and he made this beautiful bronze statue of Memorare, and it's right there in the corner. So we had in February, I think 15th of 1995, I had lots of people gathered at the corner, and we had the ceremony to dedicate the statue. So that's every year we've had something there. And it represents the final resting place of all of us who've lost members of our family because we don't know where they are. So that's what it represents. Um, and so and every year it's gotten a little bit different. You know, sometimes we always have the representatives, whether it's the ambassador or from the U.S., Britain, Australia, New Zealand, Mexico. Um, I think somebody came from Hong Kong last year or Singapore. Um, I never, Korea. Never anybody from Japan. Although the only time we've had anybody from Japan there, sort of unofficially, was when a group of about 5 Buddhist monks from Japan came, and they were doing a tour of Asia, going to different places in Asia to pray for and to ask for forgiveness. And that's the only time we've had anybody from Japan. So you know, we have a band that plays. We have the soldiers come, and usually a short talk by somebody prominent comes and talks.
Yeah, and so why did you guys? Did you and your friend, and was it your brother who formed the organization?
Yeah, Rod, my brother.
Yeah. So why did you all feel the need to have, a formal remembrance for, the war?
I guess it was an emotional reaction. We just thought nothing's been done ever, you know. There's nothing except around Manila at the time. You'll see plaques done by the historical society saying here something happened here in 18 something, and something happened here, and this is a site of the something happened here, and so that sort of got us started. And we thought we need to make a statement. We need to make a statement because there's nothing. So that was our statement. It's not a political statement. It's just an emotional statement of these. This is for our family, all our families. And as I said, we had a committee of about 12 or 15 of us, and that's where we came from. Now, as I told you, the Chinese group erected a statue to the comfort women, and that's politically has been taken down. That happened last year, but this so far it's been okay. Who knows? In this day and age, when they're tearing down all the statues, I hope that still remains. But anyway, it's just our way of saying this is in memory of our loved ones.
Yeah, and just to validate their existence, right?
Yeah.
And so for the statue, why did you feel the need to create and dedicate a statue to the civilians who perished during
Well, because we felt that it was important to make that statement that in the Battle of Manila, for 1 month battle, over 100,000 civilians were killed. That's another talk about the patrimony of the country, or you're losing a lot of people. We're talking about everybody who was killed in Manila, whether they were a prominent professor at the University of the Philippines, or they were just a common person who sold ice cream on the boulevard, who were killed, or the street sweeper. Everybody, that's just one part of the civilian group who were killed. And we wanted to say, this is what happened. They weren't soldiers, they were civilians. And they were not only men, they were men, women, children, and infants. That was our statement.
Yeah, and you felt that prior to that, there really hadn't been a whole lot of,
Nothing.
commemorations or statues or anything honoring these civilians who lost their lives.
There hasn't been any, as far as I know, nothing. Nothing.
Yeah. And you said that your statue is mostly apolitical. It's just like this is what we remember and we want to honor our
Yeah.
faith.
Yeah.
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 And
We
so
just
what?
want to honor them. That
Yeah.
was it. This is an honor of them. And it's written at the base of the statue. Um, so yeah, to honor the civilians.
Yeah. And then so why was the Comfort Woman statue torn down by the government?
Because I think there was pressure from Japan and the current president of the Philippines decided it shouldn't. It was erected on the boulevard, which runs along the bay, Manila Bay, and they had it erected there. I have a picture of it. I dig it up and send it to you. And they one day, while it was one night, it was one night, early morning, 2 a.m, they came in and with a digger and dug it up and took it away. It was political. I mean, it was, um, you know, so that's
Yeah.
why.
Yeah, but your statue apparently doesn't seem to bother the.
No, and the mayor of Manila, the mayors of Manila have always been supportive of us. Um, so and the government and the office of the president, of whoever the president has been, has supported us. And one year we had a former president as one of our main speakers. So yeah, it's see this is honoring the people of of Manila. It's not, and even though the Comfort Women statue is honoring the women of the Filipino women who are comfort women, it still is. It's a political issue, I think, and it goes back to why the Japanese haven't said I'm sorry. Admit it, Actually, in one of the papers, this is interesting. We have to have it completely translated. In one of the papers that we have from Japan at the library, is a book about comfort women, and if we can get it translated, it comes from the book is from Japan. It might shed more light on this, because the I think the official um, feeling from the government of Japan is that the women wanted to do this, you know.
Yeah, I think the
And
government still claims that they were just prostitutes or something. They were
yeah,
real.
yeah, that's what I'm saying. Or they were prostitutes, or they were gaining from somehow. And I'm sure there were some women who did that, but there were most of them didn't, weren't like that. So
Yeah, most of them were just young women who were kind of forced into this, I think.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
So uh-huh.
yeah,
And
but
anyway, our statue so far it's been safe. I hope.
yeah, I hope
We
so.
have a guard. We had to hire a guard who's there, um, who takes care of it, takes care of things.
Yeah, because I know that even though the one Comfort Woman statue that they erected in San Francisco is still there, I mean, and it
Yeah,
still
it's still there.
stands. That it's been vandalized like a couple times already.
I think so. I think so. Yeah. But the mayor and everybody else uh, that says supported it, and I think they cut the ties. I think it was their sister city of someplace in Japan, and I think they cut ties with them. They're not going. Hopefully, they're not going to tear it down.
Yeah, I don't think so because the late mayor was a really adamant supporter of.
Yeah, Mary Lee. Yeah, what a loss.
Yeah.
God, how tragic when he died. Couldn't believe it. Oh,
And then, but the current mayor is also, also supportive to the extent that she could be because the populace mostly is mostly in favor of the statue, right?
yeah, yeah. Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
Although not as openly because she is also working with various Japanese companies. So
Yeah, but it's not the companies that are doing it. It's a sister city thing that gets involved. At least I know that was it in Manila, I think. Because most Japanese big corporations are not going to, I don't think, would get involved with that. I think who knows who it is, but it was a political thing in the Philippines. But I understand the statue is now somewhere, I can't remember where it is, but it's in safekeeping. So, and Memorare Manila still exists in Manila, and it's under another umbrella of another foundation, and we work closely with the Chinese group from the museum there. Um, they're part of our umbrella group, so we all work together.
Yeah. And do you currently still manage Memorare Manila, or has?
No, no, we don't, because of some glitch in the management of it. We were told that that we either had to disband and start again, or go under the arm of another foundation group. And there's another group called Manila World War II Foundation, and one of our board members' family started that. So that's what we're under, and we're part of them. So she's up to date, and she's a real dynamo. So we're in good hands. And it's a pretty much of a grass. I mean, we don't spend a lot of money doing it, except what this year we had the conference in the Philippines, and and then afterwards we got together after the remembrance, we get together with a whole group of people who come. We have a brunch afterwards, and everybody pays their way, so it works well.
Yeah.
But we have to get younger people like you, Carolyn, involved, and so we tapped into some University of the Philippines students who are part of it, but we need the next generation to step up, and that's why we're under this umbrella group, because they're younger and can carry it on.
Yeah, and I think you're also part of Baton Legacy, right? So how did you get involved with that organization? And
well, I got involved with that organization because I also sit on the board of my uncle and aunt's foundation that they founded here in San Francisco, and Cecilia 6 years ago wrote us a letter saying that she was going to have this meeting, and would we like to come? And so I raised my hand and I said, sure, I'll go. So I went there and I met Cecilia, and was very impressed with what she had done and what her plans were. So that's how I got involved with Cecilia, and helping her arrange the conferences after that. So she does that on her own. I mean, this is her baby, and she's just reached out to so many people and has links everywhere. Really been great. And then Memorare, what we do is whenever Cecilia Baton Legacy has a conference here, Memorare Manila is a sponsor. We liked it because we felt it was important to get our name up there linked to the Baton Legacy. So that's why we're always on her logo if she's sending any information out that we're there. And then the University of San Francisco here has a Philippine Studies program as part of their curriculum. So we've linked up with them. And the program is endowed by a family from the Philippines, and the woman who started Philippine International Aid, which I was a member of, that her family endowed the Philippine Studies program at the University of San Francisco. So anyway, so that's why we're linked with them.
Yeah. And so You said that for a long time before, getting involved with in Memorare Manila and Baton Legacy and meeting all sorts of people who are knowledgeable about the war in the Philippines.
Yeah.
You really didn't want to talk about it or think about it too much. So how did you end up coming to terms with your own trauma as from what you experienced during the war as a child?
How did I
End up coming to terms with your own trauma?
Oh, well, I just figured out that, that after Memorare, I got my children were all there. They came with me. And so it was a way that I got my children interested in, because they would, I wasn't talking to my children either. And finally it was like, okay, Mom, tell us what what happened to you. Write about it and talk to us about it. And we were all interested in it. So they became interested in what I was doing. And so uh, that's one reason I just had kind of the courage to go out and talk, because I'm not a speaker per se, you know. I'm sort of like to be in the background. Uh, so it just gave me the courage to get up there and talk about it and to see. And it started really when the Philippine Consul General here asked, when the consulate here had a Memorial Day gathering, and they asked me to come. So I went and I spoke there. Um, and and um, and I met lots of more other people, and so that was a good start for me, because they're people. The audience there are people who pretty much knew what had gone on, but really didn't know that much about it. So it was a good beginning for me.
Yeah, and I think you also mentioned before that in the 1990s you finally found the ability and the will to just let go of the burdens that have been thrust upon you from your experiences during the war. So how did you find the will and the ability to forgive at that time, and what does letting go mean to you?
Oh, letting go just means that it's like you're taking a deep breath and you just go, oh, you know, okay, I've got all this stuff in my brain, in my heart, and my lungs, and I'm letting it go. I'm letting it go because I fulfilled mostly what I had thought about. I finally found a way to honor my mother and my grandmother, my aunt and uncle, and all the other people I knew, to honor them. That was my first priority. And so that was a big load off me. And now I was able to get on with my life, to accept what happened, and do something a little bit more on everyone's behalf. So that's what I mean about letting go. Now, to say, somebody said, well, have you forgiven everything? I would go, oh yeah, I guess letting go is my form of forgiveness, because I'm saying, but who am I forgiving? Can I ever forgive? Can I ever forgive the person who may have killed my mother, with a machine gun? I don't know if I could personally. I don't know who this person is. Um, so what's the idea of forgiveness? So I talk about it as letting go. And I guess it is forgiveness. I guess it's just that, let it go, and come back to it when you need to. But you can let it. You can talk about it now without feeling, without keeping anything inside you. You can talk about it without crying the whole time when you're talking about it. Um, you can you can do it. You can do it, because other people have seen worse and been through worse, and they can talk about it. So that's how I got started. Um, and I remember talking to a woman who was part of the Jewish contingency here that has speakers, and and um, and how she said, you've got to do it. You owe this to to your family, and you owe this to your mother and the memory of your mother and your grandmother and your family. And this is part of your history, and you can do it. You can go out and do it. So that's another way of approaching something.
So by do it, did she mean like talk about it?
Talk about it. Yeah. Write about it, talk about it, answer questions about it. That kind of thing. It was too late for me to ask my father more questions. That's another thing I regret. And my uncle. And the only reason, and about 5 or 6, oh yeah, it was less than 10 years ago, a relative of mine in Manila said to me, you know, I have an extra copy of Uncle Joe's memoirs that he dictated back in, I don't know, 1990 or something, early. And I said, oh, I didn't know that he even dictated. I said, I didn't know anything about it. She said, well, I have this extra copy. Do you want it? And I said, sure. So I took it, and my God, everything. And by then my uncle had died. So I thought, my God, there was so many questions I could have asked him, and the answers were in his memoir. No, it's a memoir that's locked away somewhere. I don't know whether it can't be published for another 50 years or something. I don't know why, but I have it, and and to me, that was a gift. That was another reason I could sort of document things and understand things, which is great. My father, unfortunately, he was a wonderful letter writer. I have a lot of his letters that he wrote to me and to the family after the war, but I don't have anything that he kept from the war, which I really, truly regret. And I really, truly regret sitting down and talking to him. So that's why I didn't want that to happen to me and my children. I wanted to get it out.
So that they could, pass on your story.
Right? Yeah. I wanted to pass it on. Sure.
So, yeah, when it comes to forgiveness, have you tried to forgive? And if so, who or what are you trying to forgive?
I don't think I have to. I think I've done it. I've done it. I don't think there's anything I need to forgive anymore. I just want to find out a little bit more. And then and that's it. I think I've done everything I could, and I don't need to do anything more.
Yeah. So what it was forgiveness for you? You said, because you said like you've done it.
Well, forgiveness to me is just the reality of what happened. I've done my research. I've talked to people. I've written people. I'm being interviewed by people. I've let it out, and that's my contribution. And that's part of the forgiveness process. I'm not a one to just say, oh, you hurt me, or you killed my dog, or you killed my mother 2 minutes ago, so I'm going to forgive you. I got to process the whole thing. I've gone through the process. So I've figured, well, it's done. So I've gone through it. I understand. I don't understand why people can be so cruel to each other. I never was raised that way. I don't harbor any hatred towards people. I'm just trying to figure out what happens to people in wartime that they can be so horribly cruel, inhumane. To people. I don't get it. I don't understand it. I don't think anybody understands it, frankly.
Yeah, definitely. But you don't really feel the need to, forgive the people who killed your mother.
No, I don't. No, it's too low. I can't. Otherwise, I'd be a miserable person, and I'm not a miserable person. I'm pretty even Steven, and I, try to be a good person and respect people and teach my children, and my grandchildren are all involved in this. They know about the family, and so it's good. I passed it on. which is a nice thing to. It's a good thing. It was a good thing to do. Um, so
Yeah. And so, can you tell me about any objects from the war era that you or your family still have, like photographs, pieces of clothing, or anything like that?
yeah, I have. In fact, I'll send you a picture of the picture of taken at the prisoner of war camp when we were reunited with my father. I'll send you that picture. Unfortunately, there were no pictures taken during the war. I don't have anything. I have pre-war and after, but I don't have anything. I don't think anybody had a camera. I'm not sure. We so and I have my father when he was in camp. He played a lot of cribbage, which is a card game. And I play dominoes. You know when you count the things. So he's got this wooden domino thing with in back. It's he carved in with a knife STIC, which means Santo Tomas internment camp, and then the date. So I have that of his. Um, and then I have a certificate that says that he was a guest of the Emperor of Japan, which was sort of tongue in cheek with his name on it. But and I do have a painting um, that belonged to my grandparents that was in our house that had been looted. And after the war, the we found they were selling things in a market. My family found the painting, and we found some objects from the family, silver objects that were there. So we have that. And then during the war, there was during an air raid or something, a shrapnel came in through the window and landed on our dining room table, just like went right in like this, and some of it was sticking out. And it was almost in the middle of the table, of the round table. And we never took it out. It was there till we left. And then um, a cousin has the table, but she took the shrapnel out and she did not know the story. Gosh, later on she said, if I'd known the story, I would not have done what I had done. She had it refinished and took the shrapnel out. So that was something that was sort of a interesting little piece in our household. Um, but that was it. We did find, interestingly enough, we thought that our house that we lived in had been torn down because about 10 years ago when we drove by, we saw the house was gone, and in its place on this main street, there was a temple, a Chinese Buddhist temple there. And we thought, oh no, they tore down the old house and built the temple. Well, what we found, and it was somebody we knew. We sold the house to this man who was a friend of our family's, and he lived there till he died 10 years ago. And so we thought, oh dear, that's too bad. Well, this year we decided to snoop a little bit further. So we went to the back of the house, and we were with my brother and this young professor from Arkansas State, and the driver, and our driver who knows the area and who has worked for the family. So he got out of the car and he went to the gate in the back and knocked on the gate. He was allowed in, and what we've discovered was that the temple was built, but it's very narrow. It was built on the garden of our house, and then the house was in the middle, and then another house was built in the back, facing the back street. Well, darn it, if our house is still there, hidden by the temple in the front and hidden by this apartment building in the back. So our house is still there, which was a miracle. We couldn't even believe it. So next time we go, I mean, the house is exactly the way it was, except it doesn't have a garden in the front. So that was kind of exciting. And we're going to find out who owns the house so we can maybe go and visit it next year when we go back. So that was kind of fun because anyway, that's something that for the past.
Wow, yeah, that sounds interesting.
Yeah.
You get to see it and meet
Yeah.
the people in there now.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so when people mention the war nowadays or mention any events in the Philippines, does that still provoke any kind of emotional reaction from you, or is it just history to you now, like being from?
No, it really, I wouldn't say, I think now I'm more practical, think about it practically. If somebody talks about it or mentions it, um, I will, if they ask me, I'll tell them about my experiences, and I'm always interested in asking them about their experiences. Um, so sometimes we can sort of tie it together. Um, and recently, in the last few years, I've become friendly with this woman whose late husband's mother and father lived in our neighborhood, and and her late mother-in-law, her late in-laws were also um, executed by the Japanese, and her ex-mother, her late mother-in-law, and my grandmother were friends. And they would go together to bring in this typhoid antitoxin to the soldiers who were in the POW camp. So that was kind of interesting, the link that I had with her. And she never knew her in-laws because she married after the war, and her husband was a child during the war, so she met him much later. But it was kind of we felt almost connected, you know. We are connected in some ways. That her mother-in-law and my grandmother were friends and did this together. So it's some comfort, you know. You share part of history with somebody.
Yeah, yeah, but does looking at the old artifacts that you still have, the photograph of you reuniting with your dad, and that like a guest of the Emperor of Japan with his name, does that still elicit any kind of emotions from you?
No, no. Sometimes I think, oh wow, what life would have been like if none of this had happened. But other than that, it's just part of my growing up, you know.
Yeah. So does thinking about the war still elicit any emotions like sadness or anger or anything like that?
Not anger. I'm not angry anymore. It's sadness. Yeah, sure, it's sadness. Um, but and also an incredible amount of respect and admiration for my family, my grandmother and my mother, and all the adults in my family and what they went through, kept us together. Um, that's amazing to me. The bravery that they endured, the fear they must have had. Um, my grandmother was only 64, I think, and my mother was 35. My aunt was 25. Uncle, they were young. And the one thing that kind of bothers me at times is knowing what young women or happened to young women in wartime. I just hope that I hope that they weren't raped. Probably were. I try not to think about that. And then killed, because they were young women in a situation, a vulnerable situation. So sometimes that enters my mind, my brain. But anyway.
Yeah. And so where do you think that these thoughts and emotions originate? Do you believe that they simply arise from just your own internal processing, or did another outside party also contribute greatly to your reaction?
Well, sometimes when you read about or you go to a lecture and you hear about what other people have said happened during the war, or you read what happened during the war, then that maybe stimulates a discussion of things that you really don't want to go beyond what you're thinking, but you do. And uh, yeah, that happens, but it's part of the process, I think. Can't help it.
Yes. Well, it's always, I guess, partially you and then partially, what other people tell you. And
Yeah, that's right. That's right. Yeah,
yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Because a lot of awful things happen, terrible things happen earlier in the war too. I mean, so yeah, it does.
Yeah. And so how would you describe the impacts of the war on your identity and worldview as a survivor who was a young child during the conflict?
Say that again.
How would you describe the impact on your identity and worldview as a survivor who was a young child during the time of the conflict?
Oh, I don't know if I'm going to answer this correctly. As a person that I become, is that what you mean?
Yeah, just on your identity and worldview, how has, experiencing the war impacted you?
Well, I tell you, I thank God I lived through it. I mean, I survived it. That's number one. How I survived it, I don't know sometimes, because I've talked to people who were in the same situation. We said, good God, I don't know how we survived that. So I'm very thankful that I did, uh, and it just wasn't my time, and so I'm trying to lead a good life, and I tried to do the right thing all the time. Maybe sometimes I didn't, but it makes you, I think, it makes you appreciate life more. I appreciate my life, and I have absolutely no regrets. Um, Never have. My husband used to say to me, "Don't ever have any regrets. Just do what you want to do, think what you want to do, act the way you should do, and don't have any regrets." So I don't have any regrets. Um, and it is what it is. It is what it was, or well, it was what it is, or something like that. Uh, and I'm thankful for the life I've had. I mean, I'm really lucky, really lucky. Um, so that's about, I think, about how I'd answer that.